The old picture thing. Really testing the technology today. Oh, yes. I hope you're still with us on Zoom. Sarah did part of the reading when she was doing the children's talk. The reading is from Matthew 13 and is the parable of the wheat and the tares. And Sarah, I think, did the verses 24 to 30. So I'm just going to read, just to confuse the chaps on the computer. I'm just going to read verses 36 to 43. That wasn't planned, so if they manage to do that, then that's great. Excellent. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels." Thank you. Oh, we've got a little bit more. "As the weeds are pulled up and burnt in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin, and all who do evil. And they will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of the Father. He who has ears, let him hear." So not one of the most comforting parables we might read this morning. But if we can go back to the old sermon PowerPoint, that'd be great. So it's harvest. Have you been harvesting? I have. Being the hunter-gatherer that I really am, it's my weekly task to harvest and bring home the grub for my family, dressed in my mammoth skin. Not an image you want now, do you? I'm afraid my harvesting is limited to the shelves of Tesco's, as might be yours, or your favourite venue might be. We're disconnected, aren't we, from the old way where the people who bought the stuff into the church had probably, by the sweat of their brow, got it out of the field and harvested it in. We're a bit sort of distant from that now, and we rely on people to do all those things for us, probably with little thanks, and many of them with less remuneration, to provide the things that we are fortunate enough to have in abundance in the West. But recent events have probably made us think twice. All that grain in Ukraine, for example, given us a wake-up call to realise that perhaps we shouldn't be so complacent. I've done my bit. I've grown my own strawberries this year, and it was a very good harvest indeed. They just kept on growing. I've baked my bread, but of course I'm dependent on the people who've got the flour and made the flour from the grain that's collected from the field. So, next slide please. Harvest Festival then is a time to remember and reconnect with the real sources of our essentials, the necessities and luxuries that we enjoy. It's a time really to go right back to basics and say, where does all this stuff come from? Who is responsible for all the things we have? So it's a time to remember God. The hymn says, "Then thank the Lord, oh thank the Lord for all his love." I'm going to sing that in a bit. So harvest is a traditional celebration, celebrated all over the world when the crops are gathered in, securing the survival for another year. And I think I'm right in saying that Thanksgiving started in America. At the end of that first year when those first Pilgrim Fathers had managed to survive an awful, absolutely dreadful time, not all of them had survived, but they got to the point where they could sit down and thank God for their survival. And it was a time to remember and celebrate in November, strangely. God tells the Israelites in Exodus 23:16 to celebrate. He says, "Celebrate the harvest festival, the festival of harvest, with the first fruits of your crops, so you sow in the fields. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you're gathering your crops from the field. So we also should be thankful to God for his faithfulness and for his fruitfulness, or for the fruitfulness of the earth. And one of the things that is often said at Harvest Festival is the promise that God made to Noah in Genesis chapter 8. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, daytime and night and day, will never cease. I'm going to hold God to that because mankind's doing his best to put that right. But harvest comes at different times of year for different places. But nowadays our festival really doesn't reflect the fact that these things have just been gathered in, does it? Old Testament festivals had a dual purpose, I think. It was a time when they celebrated the fact that they'd collected all the things in that they needed to eat. It was also a time when they remembered and were reminded of God's actions and blessings in the past, like feeding when they were in the wilderness. But we should also realise that the Israelites were told to bring their first fruits. This is a challenge. Not the leftovers, not the blemished bits, but the first, the best, the perfect fruit, the best of the flock were to be offered to God, given to the Levites, sacrificed to God. So, what are the fruits of our labours? God calls on us to be thankful and give the best to God because God deserves it. Perfectly seamless then, almost, wasn't it? At Keswick this year I bought a book called Grateful by Peter Maiden. It's an incredible book, partly because he wrote it in the few months before his sadly died of cancer, which makes some of his comments even more poignant. But in his book, he talks about being a small child in a Christian home, being taught really by his parents what they did about how he should live his life and what was important to him or should be important to him. He describes how his dad used to come home with his pay packet. Some of you are too young to remember this. People used to come home with an envelope full of money back in the day. His dad used to come home with his pay packet on a Friday, and he used to open it, and he used to take out 10% of what he'd earned and put that into a jar for God. That they wouldn't touch that would be given directly to the church or to what they felt God was calling them to donate it to. And then they would have the rest of the money to spend on themselves. That seemed very hard, particularly, as he said, they had to go without, because when he was little, they weren't too well off. But that's what his father used to do. He used to give his tithe at the beginning of the week. Well, on the day it was given because it was a Friday. It wasn't the beginning of the week, was it? He used to give his money or put his money aside so that it would never be touched. I know lots of other people have jam jars they put money in for various purposes, but that's what they used to do in his house. And he said he had to wait a bit longer for extras and luxuries, but he was glad to learn that lesson for himself. And it was something that he did. He could honestly say he'd done throughout his life, to honour God and to be thankful to God for what God had done for him. Are our gifts to God and to the church generous love gifts? Or are they the cast-offs, leftovers and things we don't want? Oops. The challenge for us is to put God first. Well, we've got several things, and we've got 5 minutes to talk about them. The Bible talks about harvest a lot. And in Matthew 13, if you read the whole of Matthew 13, you'll realise that this isn't the only parable in Matthew 13 that talks about harvest. But Jesus uses harvest as a symbol. When Jesus is talking about harvest, he's not talking about harvest, strangely. He's talking about people. When Jesus talks about sheep, he's not talking about sheep. When Jesus talks about shepherds, he's not really talking about shepherds. It's all very plain. But here, when he's talking about seeds and harvests and gathering in crops, he's talking about people. He uses this picture of the wheat and the tares. It's really easy to understand because he explains it later on to the disciples who are a bit dim. The farmer sows his seeds, and someone comes along and throws in these weeds, tares. It's an actual plant. It's an actual plant. And it looks really, really like wheat. So as it starts to grow, it looks identical. It would be impossible to separate the two. And as they get a bit bigger, it'd be impossible to separate them anyway because they're so closely entwined together. The challenge is, of course, that if you ate the tares, they would make you ill. They're not really edible. So here we've got this farmer who says to his workers, leave them alone, don't touch them, let them grow. I was interested by that, because I thought, I wonder what Mrs. King would think about that as a gardening strategy. How about Carol? What would Carol think of you leaving the wheat and the flowers to grow together? It might not look so good, but this is what the farmers are instructed to do. Seems like the PowerPoint's going on at a rate of knots here. Are we on slide 5? This is what the farmers tells his workers to do. Really, it's a picture of the world. It's a really realistic picture of the world, because not everyone believes, and there's a real chance that those who don't believe, or the evil forces in the world, can hinder God's work. The devil can infect the crop with weeds. The devil is at work in the world. As interestingly in verse 30, in the parable, Sarah referred to it. Jesus said, the man said, let them both grow together till the harvest. Let them both grow together till the harvest. So what does this parable teach us? I'd like to be on slide 6, lads. That's great. What does this parable teach us? Well, it does teach us that there are evil forces in the world. There are evil things. There are things that can seek to destroy the good seed. There are things at work in the world to influence us and draw us aside. It also teaches us it's difficult to distinguish between those who are in the kingdom and those who are not, the good and the bad. A person may appear good or may appear bad. A person who appears bad actually may turn out to be good. We can be too quick to classify people and label them without knowing all the facts. So it also teaches us not to be so quick to judge. If the workers had their way, they would have pulled everything up, and in doing so, most of the wheat would have been pulled up as well. Judgment had to wait until the harvest. None of us will be judged by a single act or a particular part of our lives. Someone who is doing wrong now or in the wrong place now could easily redeem themselves and turn to the Lord later on. The farmer's instructions to let them grow together until the harvest, in this case, is the right thing to do. But it also teaches us that judgment does come in the end. It may seem sometimes there's no justice in life, that the evil people go unpunished, escaping the consequences of their actions. There is a new world. There's a new world coming, where the balance will be redressed, where God alone will be the judge. Romans 12 verse 19 says, leave it to the wrath of God. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. God's concern then is for everyone to get a chance. He's delaying uprooting the weeds because of the chance of uprooting those who believe or may believe in the future to be part of their kingdom. God is giving people time. The day will come when our chances will be over, but at the moment, God is giving people time. So what about us? What will the harvest be? It seems to me that I was reading this story. Yes, there are evil in the world that can influence us or change us or affect us, but there's also ways in which those tares can be in us. It's possible for us to allow negative and evil things to dominate our thoughts and pull us away from serving and worshipping the Lord. In this time of uncertainty, when so many things have changed or stopped, what is going to happen? Can we expect our lives to be fruitful? What sort of seed or crop are we going to be? Jesus has blessed us in so many ways. He's been faithful to us and provided so much for us to enjoy, none of which actually we deserve. But here we are again at another harvest, and I've nearly finished, surviving the ups and downs of another year. What will our response be? We've been through some times of drought, in a way. Call it drought. We've been through some times of pruning, perhaps. But if we are good soil and we abide in Jesus and seek to draw our life and energy from him, there will be fruit. It was interesting reading a publication by the BU this week that came through the Post, their monthly publication. They were talking about churches who've had the same experience as us, who might be thinking the same thing. Will there be a harvest? And the encouragement there was to abide in Jesus, to put our lives and our hearts in the Lord. And if we do, there will be fruit. We started with Psalm 63 this morning, and verse 3 and 4 says, "Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live." And I think this harvest is a time when we can make that commitment afresh. Because of the goodness of the Lord and the love of God to us, we'll make it our determination to serve him and praise him. Amen. Amen. Now, the lady who's coughing has got a very nice poem that I hope she's going to read to us now.